Aliens watch in awe as humanity's courage changes the course of battle. Commander Zeth Kar of the Galactic Defense Coalition stood frozen on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display with growing disbelief. The massive holographic screen showed thousands of red dots converging on a single blue speck in the darkness of space. The blue dot represented the human colony ship, New Horizon, carrying over 50,000 civilians fleeing from the devastated world of Kepler 442b. The red dots were HFY warships, each one capable of obliterating a small moon. The HFY had swept through 3 star systems in the past month, their biomechanical ships consuming everything in their path. Planets stripped bare, their populations either enslaved or processed into raw materials for the hive's endless expansion. No military force had managed to slow them down for more than a few hours. Even the mighty Korthani Empire, with their quantum phase cannons and reality-warping shields, had fallen in less than a week. "Sir," reported Navigation Officer Veltana, her crystalline voice trembling with barely contained fear. "The human vessel is not changing course. They're flying directly toward the HFY fleet." Zeth Kar's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of extreme confusion among his people. "Are their navigation systems malfunctioning? Send them our sensor data. They must know what they're flying into." Communications Officer Hurlgen manipulated his console with practiced efficiency. After a moment, he looked up with his large, compound eyes reflecting the bridge's amber lighting. "Message sent, Commander. But, sir, I'm detecting something unusual. The human ship's energy readings are fluctuating in patterns I've never seen before." The Coalition had been monitoring this human colony ship for weeks, ever since they'd received the desperate evacuation signal from Kepler 442b. The humans were a relatively new species to the galactic community, having only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. Most species required centuries to develop reliable FTL technology, but humans had somehow managed it in a fraction of the time. They were known for their unpredictable nature and their tendency to find unconventional solutions to impossible problems. But this was beyond unconventional. This was suicide. "Incoming transmission from the human vessel," announced Hurlgen. "Put it through," Zeth Kar ordered, his tentacles gripping the command rail tighter than usual. The holographic display shimmered and resolved into the image of a human female. Her species was still strange to most Coalition members, with their bilateral symmetry and single pair of eyes. But what struck Zeth Kar immediately was the complete absence of fear in her expression. Instead, there was something else, something that made his thermal sensors register a slight increase in temperature. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the colony ship New Horizon. We've received your sensor data, Commander Zeth Kar. We know exactly what we're flying into." Zeth Kar's translator struggled with the human's tone. There was a quality to her voice that didn't exist in most galactic languages. His species had 17 different words for various types of fear, but no word for what he was hearing now. "Captain Chen?" Zeth Kar began, his voice carrying the formal cadence of military protocol. "You are flying directly toward a HFY fleet numbering in the thousands. Your single vessel cannot possibly survive such an encounter. I strongly recommend you alter course immediately." The human captain's lips curved upward in what Zeth Kar had learned was called a smile, though this one seemed different from the friendly gestures he'd seen in previous diplomatic encounters. This smile had an edge to it, like a blade drawn from its sheath. "Commander, my ship is carrying 53,000 civilians, men, women, children, elderly people who've never hurt anyone in their lives. Behind us is a dead world. Ahead of us is a fleet that wants to turn us into spare parts. And beyond that fleet is the only safe harbor for 300 light years." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried that strange quality even more strongly. We're not changing course because we can't change course. The only way home is through them. The transmission ended, leaving the Coalition bridge in stunned silence. Zethkar felt his skin change color, cycling through the deep purples and blues that indicated profound confusion among his people. "Sir," whispered Veltana, "what do we do?" Before Zethkar could respond, his tactical officer's alarm began blaring. "Commander, the human vessel is accelerating. They're moving far faster than any ship that size should be able to achieve." On the display, the blue dot representing the new horizon was indeed picking up speed, its trajectory unwavering as it headed straight for the center of the HFY formation. But something else was happening, too. The energy readings that Hurlgen had mentioned were becoming more pronounced. Strange fluctuations were rippling outward from the human ship like waves in a disturbed pond. "What kind of drive system are they using?" Zethkar demanded. His science officer, Dr. Quantum Lex, manipulated her instruments with 4 arms simultaneously. "I'm reading massive gravitational distortions, but they're not consistent with any known FTL technology. The energy signature is organic somehow, as if the ship itself is alive." "That's impossible," Zethkar stated flatly. "Only the HFY use biomechanical technology, and they would never share it with other species." "Nevertheless, Commander, that appears to be what we're observing." As they watched, the human ship continued its impossible acceleration. But now something else was happening. The HFY fleet had detected the approaching vessel and was beginning to respond. The red dots on the tactical display were shifting, forming a wall of destruction that would intercept the human ship long before it could reach whatever destination lay beyond. "They're going to be annihilated," breathed Veltana. But even as she spoke, the human ship did something that made every being on the Coalition bridge question their understanding of physics. The new horizon suddenly split into 7 identical copies of itself, each one taking a slightly different trajectory toward the HFY fleet. "Holographic projections?" suggested Dr. Quantum Lex. "Negative," replied the tactical officer. "I'm reading solid mass and energy signatures from all 7 vessels. Somehow they've multiplied their ship." Zethkar felt a chill run through his circulatory system. In all his years of military service, he had never encountered anything like this. The humans were supposed to be a young species, barely capable of interstellar travel. How were they performing feats that surpassed even the most advanced Coalition technology? The 7 human ships spread out as they approached the HFY fleet, forcing the enemy to divide their attention and firepower. Massive biocannons swiveled to track the multiple targets, their living ammunition beginning to charge with deadly energy. "Why aren't they firing?" Zethkar wondered aloud. His question was answered moments later as the first wave of HFY bioplasma burst forth from their weapons. The sickly green energy balls streaked through space, each one capable of melting through a kilometer of solid rock. But as they reached the human ships, something extraordinary happened. The plasma bursts simply passed through 6 of the 7 vessels as if they weren't there. Only one ship took damage, its shields flaring as they absorbed the tremendous impact. But instead of being destroyed, the damaged ship seemed to become more solid while the other 6 became more translucent. "Quantum phasing," Dr. Quantum Lex whispered in awe. "They're shifting between dimensional states. Only one ship exists in our reality at any given moment, but they can switch which one is solid at will." The implications of what they were witnessing began to dawn on the Coalition crew. The humans weren't just running from the HFY. They weren't just trying to survive. They were actively engaging in combat using technology that shouldn't exist. As the 7 human ships dove into the HFY formation, they began to dance. There was no other word for it. They moved with a fluid grace that defied the laws of momentum and inertia, weaving between the larger enemy vessels like leaves blown by an impossible wind. And as they danced, they struck back. Weapons emerged from the human ships that Zethkar had never seen before. Beams of pure white light that cut through Vex-High bio-armor like it was paper. Projectiles that seemed to bend space around themselves, arriving at their targets before they were actually fired. And strangest of all, some kind of field that caused the enemy ships to simply stop functioning, their biomechanical systems shutting down as if they had fallen asleep. "How many humans are on that ship?" Zethkar asked quietly. Hurlgen checked his sensors. 53,047 life signs, sir. "And how many of them are military personnel?" Another pause. "According to the ship's registry, there are no military personnel aboard. The crew consists of civilian pilots, engineers, doctors, teachers, and farmers." Zethkar felt his world shift slightly. He was watching 50,000 civilian humans, people with no military training, outfight a Vex-High fleet using impossible technology and tactics that would have impressed the greatest military minds in the galaxy. But the most amazing thing wasn't their technology or their tactics. It was their absolute refusal to surrender or retreat. Every species in the galaxy, when faced with impossible odds, had a breaking point. A moment when survival instincts overrode courage, and they would flee or surrender. The humans seemed to have no such point. As the battle continued to unfold before them, Zethkar realized that everything the Coalition thought they knew about humanity was wrong. These weren't just clever primitives who had stumbled onto FTL technology. They were something else entirely, something that the galaxy had never seen before. And as he watched their impossible ships dance through the enemy formation, leaving destruction in their wake, Zethkar began to understand why the Vex-High had never encountered effective resistance before. They had never faced a species that simply refused to accept that some battles couldn't be won. The tactical display continued to update as the engagement progressed, but Zethkar was no longer watching the positions of ships and the exchange of weapons fire. He was watching the birth of a legend, the moment when everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare would change forever. Because the humans weren't fighting to win. They were fighting because not fighting was unthinkable. And in that difference lay a power that even the most advanced technology couldn't quantify. The battle had been raging for 37 minutes, and the impossible was becoming routine. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the center of the New Horizons bridge, her hands dancing across holographic interfaces that seemed to respond to her thoughts as much as her touch. Around her, the civilian crew worked with a coordination that would have made military admirals weep with envy. "Dimensional phase in 3 seconds, called out Marcus Webb, a former agricultural engineer who now handled their reality-shifting technology as if he'd been born to it. "Switching to configuration Delta 7. "Engineering, give me everything you've got on the port nacelles," Sarah ordered. "We're going to thread the needle between those 2 biocruisers." From the engineering section, Dr. Elena Vasquez's voice crackled over the intercom. Just 3 days ago, she had been running a children's hospital on Kepler 442b. Now, she was somehow managing power systems that operated on principles that violated half the known laws of physics. "Port nacelles at 112% capacity. The organic interfaces are responding beautifully, Captain. I think they're actually enjoying this." Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. The ship's modifications weren't entirely human in origin. When the Vex-High had first attacked their world, something unexpected had happened. The emergency shelters where the colonists had taken refuge were built using a hybrid technology, partially human and partially based on samples from a crashed alien vessel they'd discovered years earlier. As the attack progressed and hope had seemed lost, the alien technology had awakened, not maliciously, but protectively. It had bonded with the human colonists. offering them capabilities they never could have imagined. The New Horizon wasn't just a ship anymore. It was a living partnership between human determination and alien compassion. But the Coalition didn't know that. Neither did the Vexhai. On the Coalition flagship's bridge, Commander Zethkar was struggling to process what his sensors were telling him. Dr. Quantum Lex, I need you to explain to me how a single colony ship has destroyed 18% of a Vexhai fleet. The science officer's crystalline skin was cycling through colors that indicated extreme agitation. Commander, I've been running continuous analyses for the past half hour. The human vessel is employing at least 7 different technologies that our best scientists consider theoretically impossible. Their power output suggests they've somehow learned to tap directly into quantum foam. Their weapons appear to be modifying the fundamental constants of physics in localized areas, and their defensive systems are actively rewriting reality to make incoming attacks ineffective. That doesn't answer my question, Zethkar said grimly. Because I don't have an answer, Dr. Quantum Lex admitted. What we're witnessing shouldn't be possible. No single species should be able to develop this level of technology, especially not in isolation. It's as if they've had access to the combined knowledge of a dozen advanced civilizations. Navigation Officer Veltana looked up from her console with an expression of wonder. Sir, I'm detecting something else. The human ship isn't just fighting the Vexhai, it's learning from them. Every time the enemy adapts their tactics, the humans adapt faster. It's like they're running thousands of combat simulations simultaneously. On the tactical display, the evidence of her observation was clear. The 7 human ships had reorganized themselves into a formation that somehow allowed them to be in multiple places at once, while concentrating their firepower with surgical precision. They weren't just fighting the Vexhai. They were systematically dismantling them. But more than that, they were protecting the Coalition fleet. Every time a Vexhai ship tried to break away from the main engagement to attack Zethkar's forces, one of the human vessels would intercept it. Despite being outnumbered 50-1, they were somehow managing to shield the Coalition ships while conducting their own offensive operations. They're covering our retreat, Zethkar realized with shock. They're not just fighting for their own survival, they're protecting us too. The implications of this hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. Most species, when facing extinction, focused entirely on their own survival. The idea that the humans would expend precious resources protecting potential allies was unthinkable by galactic standards. Commander, Communications Officer Hurlgen announced, I'm receiving a transmission from the human vessel, but it's not directed at us. They're broadcasting on an open channel to the entire Vexhai fleet. Put it through, Zethkar ordered, his curiosity overriding protocol. Captain Sarah Chen's image appeared on the holographic display, but she looked different now. There was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. A depth that seemed to contain entire universes. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that Zethkar's translator couldn't interpret. Vexhai Collective, she said, addressing her enemies directly. We know you can understand us. We know you've been listening to our communications and analyzing our behavior. We have a message for you. The battle continued to rage around them, but somehow her words seemed to cut through the chaos and reach every ship in the engagement zone. You've spent millennia consuming worlds and enslaving species because you believe that survival requires the destruction of others. You've convinced yourselves that the universe is a zero-sum game where one species' gain must be another's loss. You're wrong. She paused, and in that pause, something extraordinary happened. The human ships stopped their attack patterns and simply held position, maintaining their defensive formation, but no longer actively engaging the enemy. The Vexhai, confused by this unprecedented behavior, also ceased firing. Humanity has learned something that you haven't, Sarah continued. We've learned that true strength doesn't come from what you can destroy, but from what you can protect. Not from what you can take, but from what you can give. We didn't develop these capabilities through conquest or consumption. We developed them through cooperation. On the Coalition bridge, Dr. Quantum Lex was frantically scanning the human ship. "Commander, the energy readings are changing again. They're channeling power into some kind of field generator, but the scale is enormous. Whatever they're planning, it will affect the entire battle zone." "We're going to show you something," Sarah said, her voice now carrying those strange harmonics so strongly that they seemed to resonate in the bones of every being listening. "We're going to show you what happens when 50,000 people decide that protecting others is more important than protecting themselves." The field that Dr. Quantum Lex had detected suddenly expanded, washing over every ship in the engagement zone. But instead of being a weapon, it was something else entirely. Coalition sensors registered massive healing energy flowing from the human vessel to every damaged ship in the area, including the Vex-High vessels. Hull breaches were sealed, damaged systems were repaired, injured crew members found their wounds healing with impossible speed. The humans were expending enormous amounts of energy to heal their enemies, even as those enemies were trying to destroy them. The effect on the Vex-High was immediate and profound. Their biomechanical ships, designed to consume and destroy, had never encountered anything like this before. Some of them actually stopped functioning entirely, not from damage, but from sheer incomprehension of what they were experiencing. "This is what humanity offers the galaxy," Sarah said, her image now seeming to glow with its own light. "Not domination through strength, but elevation through compassion. Not victory through destruction, but transcendence through understanding. We could have destroyed your fleet. Our technology gives us that capability. But we choose to heal instead." Commander Zethkar felt his worldview crumbling and rebuilding itself in real time. Everything he had believed about the nature of warfare, about the relationship between species, about the fundamental laws of survival, was being rewritten by what he was witnessing. "The question now," Sarah continued, "is what you choose to do with this gift. You can continue on your path of consumption and destruction, or you can learn what we have learned. That the universe has room for all of us, but only if we choose to make room for each other." The healing field continued to pulse outward from the human ship, and Zethkar realized that it wasn't just repairing physical damage. Something about the energy was affecting the consciousness of every being it touched. Fear was being replaced by wonder. Hatred was being transformed into curiosity. The fundamental frequencies of thought itself were being gently adjusted toward harmony. "How is this possible?" Veltana whispered. "I don't know," Zethkar admitted. "But I'm beginning to understand that the humans aren't just another species. They're something new, something the galaxy has been waiting for without knowing it." On the tactical display, the red dots representing the Vex-High fleet were beginning to change. Some were moving away from the engagement zone, their biomechanical systems apparently overwhelmed by the experience of receiving help instead of delivering harm. Others were holding position but had stopped all aggressive actions. But most significantly, a few of the red dots were changing color entirely, their identification signatures shifting as their crew's consciousness was transformed by the healing field. The humans had done something that no military force in galactic history had ever accomplished. They had defeated an enemy by refusing to treat them as an enemy. They had won a battle by choosing to heal instead of harm. And in doing so, they had changed the course of not just this battle, but the entire galactic war against the Vex-High. Because for the first time in millennia, some of the Vex-High were remembering what it felt like to be helped instead of consumed. The impossible had become inevitable, and the galaxy would never be the same. 3 hours after the healing field had transformed the battlefield, the galaxy's understanding of warfare had fundamentally shifted. Commander Zethkar stood in his private quarters aboard the Coalition flagship, staring out at the impossible sight before him. Where once there had been two opposing fleets locked in mortal combat, there was now something unprecedented in galactic history, a mixed flotilla of ships working together. Human vessels moved alongside former Vex-High bio-cruisers, sharing technical data and coordinating repair efforts. The distinctive black hulls of coalition ships drifted nearby, their crews still struggling to process what they had witnessed. A chime indicated an incoming communication. Zethkar activated his personal display to find Captain Sarah Chen's image materializing before him. But she looked different now, somehow both more human and more than human. The healing field had affected her too, though in ways that Zethkar was only beginning to understand. "Commander," she said with that same warm smile, though now he could see depths in her eyes that seemed to contain the wisdom of ages. "I wanted to thank you personally for maintaining your position during the engagement. Your crew's restraint allowed us to attempt something that wouldn't have been possible if we'd had to worry about friendly fire." "Captain Chen," Zethkar replied, his translator working overtime to convey the complex emotions he was experiencing. "I must confess that I don't understand what happened here today. My science officers are telling me that your people somehow violated the fundamental laws of physics, biology, and warfare simultaneously." Sarah's expression grew thoughtful. "We didn't violate those laws, Commander. We discovered that they're not actually laws at all. They're just agreements that most species have made about how reality should work. When you stop agreeing to limitations, the limitations stop applying to you." Before Zethkar could respond to this mind-bending statement, his door chimed again. Dr. Quantumlex entered without waiting for permission, her crystalline form practically vibrating with excitement. "Commander, forgive the intrusion, but you need to see this immediately." She activated a portable holographic display showing sensor readings from across the engagement zone. "The transformation isn't stopping, it's accelerating." The data was extraordinary. Vex-High bio ships that had been purely destructive organisms just hours ago were now generating the same kind of healing energy that the humans had used. Their crews, once single-minded in their pursuit of consumption and expansion, were working to repair damage they had caused to coalition vessels. "How is this possible?" Zethkar asked. "The human healing field didn't just repair physical damage," Dr. Quantumlex explained, her voice filled with wonder. "It somehow reactivated dormant neural pathways in the Vex-High collective consciousness, pathways that had been suppressed for so long that they'd forgotten they existed. Pathways connected to empathy, cooperation, and what humans call love." Sarah nodded from the communication display. The Vex-High weren't always a purely destructive force. Millions of years ago, they were explorers and builders. But something happened to them, something that made them believe that survival required the destruction of others. "Our healing field helped them remember who they used to be." Zethkar felt his understanding of the universe expanding in ways that were almost painful. "Are you saying that the most feared force in the galaxy was actually a wounded species that had forgotten how to heal?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," Sarah confirmed. "And it's not just the Vex-High. Every species we've encountered carries similar wounds, the conviction that resources are scarce, that survival requires competition instead of cooperation, that strength means the ability to destroy rather than the ability to create. These beliefs aren't natural law. They're just trauma responses that have been passed down for so long that they seem like truth." Dr. Quantumlex was frantically updating her readings. "Commander, I'm detecting similar changes in our own crew. The healing field has affected every being in the engagement zone. Psychological barriers that we didn't even know existed are dissolving. Our people are beginning to think in ways that were literally impossible for them just this morning." The implications of this were staggering. If what the humans had done could be replicated, if the transformation could spread beyond this single engagement zone, it would mean the end of warfare as the galaxy knew it. Not through conquest or destruction, but through healing and remembrance. "Captain Chen," Zethkar said slowly. What you've accomplished here today will change everything. The Coalition will want to study your technology to understand how this transformation works. Every species in the galaxy will want to know how you've overcome limitations that we thought were fundamental to the nature of existence itself. Sarah's expression grew serious. And that's where we have a problem, Commander. What we've shared with you today isn't really technology in the way you understand it. It's not something you can reverse engineer or mass produce. It's something you have to become. She gestured, and the communication display expanded to show images from throughout the New Horizon. Zethkar saw human civilians working alongside former Vex-High drones, their different biologies somehow complementing each other perfectly. He saw children playing games that seemed to defy gravity, their laughter somehow audible across the vacuum of space. He saw elderly humans sharing meals with crystalline beings that had once been pure energy, their different forms of consciousness blending in ways that should have been impossible. The capabilities you've witnessed aren't the result of advanced technology, Sarah explained. They're the result of 53,000 people deciding that the welfare of others was more important than their own individual survival. When that many conscious beings make that choice simultaneously, reality itself responds by making the impossible possible. Dr. Quantum Lex was recording every word, but Zethkar could see the confusion in her posture. Are you suggesting that consciousness itself can alter the fundamental constants of physics? I'm not suggesting it, Sarah replied with a smile that somehow contained entire universes of meaning. I'm demonstrating it. Right here, right now, the laws of physics in this region of space are different than they were this morning, not because we've developed new technology, but because we've remembered who we really are. A new voice joined the conversation, as Communications Officer Hurlgen's urgent tones came through the intercom. Commander, we're receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. Word of what happened here is spreading faster than light itself. Every major civilization is reporting similar transformations beginning to occur. The healing field effect is somehow propagating through subspace. Zethkar felt a chill run through his circulatory system. The entire galaxy? It appears so, sir. The Korthani Empire is reporting that their quantum phase weapons have stopped functioning, not because they're broken, but because their operators can no longer conceive of using them against living beings. The Christek Collective says their hive mind is expanding to include other species for the first time in their recorded history. Even the isolationist Voidwalkers are opening communication channels they've kept closed for millennia. Sarah nodded as if this were exactly what she had expected. Consciousness is quantum entangled across vast distances. When a sufficient number of beings in one location achieve a breakthrough in understanding, that understanding propagates to similar consciousnesses everywhere. What we've learned here today about the true nature of cooperation and compassion is spreading to every thinking being in the galaxy. But what does this mean for the future? Zethkar asked. If warfare becomes impossible, if competition is replaced by cooperation, if every species begins to work together instead of against each other, what kind of galaxy will we become? Sarah's smile grew even brighter. We'll become what we were always meant to be, Commander. Not a collection of isolated species fighting over limited resources, but a single unified consciousness exploring the infinite possibilities of existence together. As if to demonstrate her point, the holographic display shifted to show the view outside the New Horizon. Where once there had been empty space between the stars, there were now streams of light connecting every ship in the flotilla. Not artificial lights, but something deeper. The light of consciousness itself, made visible by the transformation that was sweeping across the galaxy. The universe is much larger and much stranger than any of us ever imagined, Sarah continued. There are entire dimensions of reality that we've been unable to access because we were trapped in competitive thinking. Now that we've learned to cooperate on a fundamental level, those dimensions are opening to us. We're going to discover that what we thought was the entire universe was just the smallest possible fraction of what actually exists. Dr. Quantum Lex was practically glowing with excitement. Are you saying that there are other galaxies, other dimensions, other forms of existence that we couldn't perceive before? I'm saying that everything you thought you knew about the limitations of existence was based on the limitations of isolated consciousness, Sarah replied. When consciousness unifies and cooperates instead of competing, those limitations dissolve. We're about to embark on an adventure that will make our previous understanding of exploration look like playing in a sandbox. Commander Zethkar felt something he had never experienced before, a sense of absolute peace combined with infinite possibility. The fears and concerns that had driven his entire military career were dissolving, replaced by an eagerness to discover what lay beyond the boundaries of everything he had ever known. "So what happens next?" he asked. Sarah's image began to fade, but her voice remained clear and strong. "Now we explore together, Commander. All of us. Human and Vexhai, coalition and collective. Every thinking being in the galaxy working together to discover what wonders await us in the infinite expanse of cooperative consciousness." As the communication ended, Zethkar realized that he was witnessing the end of one era and the beginning of another. The age of warfare and competition was over. The age of cooperation and exploration had begun. And it had all started with 53,000 humans who simply refused to accept that some battles couldn't be won through compassion instead of destruction. They had changed the course of a single battle, and in doing so, they had changed the destiny of the entire galaxy. The impossible had become inevitable, and the universe would never be the same.